There are books that endure because they tell a compelling story, and there are books that survive because every generation discovers something new within them. The Odyssey belongs to the latter. For nearly 3,000 years, it has been read as an adventure, a tale of monsters and storms, of enchanted islands and distant kingdoms. It has inspired countless novels, films, and myths of its own, becoming almost synonymous with the idea of an epic journey. Yet there is something peculiar about Homer's poem. Beneath the familiar episodes of sirens and sea monsters lies a work whose deepest concerns are surprisingly ordinary. The victories are memorable, but they are rarely the destination. Every trial serves a single purpose: to carry one exhausted man a little closer to his home. This alone distinguishes the Odyssey from nearly every heroic epic that preceded it or followed it. Epic poetry traditionally celebrates the pursuit of glory. Heroes venture into danger because greatness is found on the battlefield, and the highest ambition is to secure a name that will outlive death itself. Homer certainly knew this tradition. After all, he had already immortalized it in the Iliad, where Achilles willingly exchanges a long and peaceful life for eternal renown. The Odyssey moves in another direction. Glory remains present, but it occupies a different place within the story. Odysseus does not seek fame through his adventures. His encounters with monsters, kings, and gods are obstacles that stand between him and the life he has already built. Every act of courage becomes a means rather than an end. The hero is driven less by the desire to be remembered than by the hope of embracing his wife, seeing his son as a grown man, and reclaiming the home that has nearly vanished from his grasp. Perhaps this is why the Odyssey continues to resonate so deeply with modern readers. Most people do not dream of conquering cities or earning immortal fame. They dream of returning to the people they love after hardship, of restoring what has been broken, and of finding peace after years of uncertainty. Homer takes the grand machinery of epic poetry and turns it toward these quieter aspirations, suggesting that they may be every bit as worthy of heroic effort. The Odyssey, then, is not simply another story about a hero. It is a meditation on what a hero should ultimately strive to become. To understand what makes the Odyssey so unusual, we must first understand the ideal that dominated the world in which it was composed. The ancient Greek hero did not simply seek victory. He sought kleos, a form of glory that would outlive his own death. A warrior's body would eventually perish, but his name could achieve a kind of immortality if his deeds were remembered and celebrated by future generations. In many respects, this pursuit of lasting renown stood at the very center of Greek heroic culture. The Iliad is perhaps the clearest expression of this ideal. Achilles is offered two possible lives. One promises peace, family, and old age, but little remembrance after death. The other offers everlasting fame at the cost of a short life on the battlefield. He knowingly chooses the latter, becoming the perfect embodiment of kleos. His decision is celebrated throughout the poem because glory is presented as the highest reward a man can attain. The Odyssey enters this same world, yet it gradually shifts the reader's attention toward a different understanding of fulfillment. Odysseus is already one of Greece's greatest heroes. His reputation has been secured through the Trojan War, and his role in devising the wooden horse has guaranteed him a place among the legendary figures of Greek history. He has nothing left to prove. His journey is therefore not driven by the desire to earn glory, but by an altogether different longing. He wishes to return to the ordinary life that war forced him to abandon. This difference changes the meaning of nearly every adventure in the poem. The Cyclops is not a monster to be defeated for fame. Scylla and Charybdis are not challenges undertaken in pursuit of greatness. The sirens do not tempt Odysseus away from his quest because they stand between him and military victory. Each encounter delays his return home, and each victory simply removes another obstacle from his path. The heroic deeds remain, but their purpose has quietly changed. Homer makes this transformation unmistakable during Odysseus' descent into the underworld. There he meets Achilles, the greatest warrior of the Trojan War, and the very man whose pursuit of Kleos shaped the events of the Iliad. One might expect Achilles to speak proudly of the eternal glory he earned. Instead, he expresses regret. He declares that he would rather live as a humble laborer among the living than reign as king over all the dead. The significance of this moment is difficult to overstate. Homer allows the greatest champion of heroic glory to question the value of the very ideal that defined his life. The words do not erase Achilles' greatness, nor do they condemn courage or sacrifice. They simply reveal that glory, once attained, cannot compensate for the loss of life itself. A celebrated death remains a death. The Odyssey never argues that courage is unimportant. Odysseus repeatedly demonstrates bravery, endurance, and remarkable ingenuity. What the poem questions is the assumption that fame should be the ultimate object of human striving. By placing the regrets of Achilles beside the determination of Odysseus to reach his family, Homer invites the reader to reconsider the hierarchy of values that had long defined heroic literature. The result is an epic unlike any that came before it. Glory is no longer the destination toward which every action points. It remains present, but it has been displaced by something quieter and perhaps more enduring. The hero who once fought to preserve his name now fights to recover his place at his own table. Before the Odyssey can tell us what home truly means, it first asks whether the applause of history has ever been capable of replacing it. Once the Odyssey loosens the grip of Kleos, another idea gradually takes its place. Homer begins to elevate something that earlier heroic literature rarely treated as the highest reward. That reward is home. To a modern reader, this may appear self-evident. Returning to one's family after a long and devastating war seems like an obvious goal. Yet within the tradition of ancient epic, it represents a remarkable shift in emphasis. Heroes usually leave home in search of greatness. Odysseus spends the entire poem trying to recover what he already possessed before greatness carried him away. This changes the meaning of the journey itself. At first glance, the Odyssey appears to be a collection of extraordinary adventures. The Cyclops, Circe, the Sirens, Scylla, Charybdis, the Lotus Eaters, and Calypso have become so famous that they often overshadow the destination toward which the story is moving. Yet none of these episodes is the true subject of the poem. They are interruptions. Every island delays the return. Every victory simply removes another barrier between Odysseus and Ithaca. The structure of the Odyssey quietly reinforces this idea. In many heroic tales, the greatest battle marks the climax of the narrative. In Homer's poem, the most important moments occur after the adventures have ended. The emotional center of the story is not found in the blinding of Polyphemus or the escape from Charybdis. It lies in the reunion of a husband with his wife, a father with his son, and eventually a son with his aging father. These scenes contain little spectacle, yet Homer lingers over them with remarkable care, suggesting that they possess a significance no battlefield can rival. Even the kingdom of Ithaca is described in surprisingly modest terms. It is not the richest kingdom in Greece, nor the most powerful. Homer never invites the reader to admire it because of its wealth or military strength. Odysseus longs for Ithaca because it is his own. The value of the place does not arise from its grandeur, but from the relationships that give it meaning. Home is precious because it is inhabited by the people to whom one belongs. Perhaps nowhere is this clearer than in Odysseus's encounter with Calypso. She offers him something no mortal could reasonably expect. He may remain with her forever, free from suffering, free from old age, and even free from death itself. It is an astonishing offer. For countless heroes throughout mythology, immortality would have represented the highest imaginable reward. Odysseus refuses. His decision has often been understood simply as an expression of marital fidelity, but it reaches further than that. He chooses a finite life among his own people over an endless existence detached from everything that has shaped his identity. Immortality, stripped of family, memory, and belonging, no longer appears desirable. Homer presents an extraordinary paradox. A mortal life, lived in the company of those we love, possesses a fullness that endless existence cannot guarantee. This may be one of the Odyssey's most enduring insights. Human beings often imagine fulfillment as something waiting beyond the horizon, beyond the next achievement, the next conquest, or the next ambition. Homer gently turns our attention in the opposite direction. The greatest treasure in the poem is not discovered in a distant land. It has been waiting in Ithaca from the very beginning. By making home the destination toward which every adventure points, Homer quietly transforms the meaning of heroism itself. The measure of a great man is no longer found solely in the cities he conquers or the enemies he defeats. It is also found in the life he considers worth returning to. If home gives the Odyssey its destination, hope provides the strength to continue moving toward it. Without it, the journey would have ended long before Odysseus reached the shores of Ithaca. It is hope that binds together the three principal figures of the poem, Odysseus, Penelope, and Telemachus, allowing them to endure years of uncertainty without surrendering to despair. Unlike many ancient epics, the Odyssey unfolds in a world where certainty is almost entirely absent. None of its central characters knows how the story will end. Odysseus cannot know whether his family still lives. Penelope has no proof that her husband survived the Trojan War. Telemachus has spent most of his life without a father and possesses little reason to believe that he will ever meet him. Their decisions are therefore not sustained by knowledge but by hope. This distinction is important. Hope does not eliminate suffering. Homer never portrays it as a comforting illusion that shields his characters from grief. On the contrary, the Odyssey is filled with loneliness, disappointment, captivity, and loss. Hope exists alongside these hardships, making perseverance possible precisely because the future remains uncertain. Penelope perhaps embodies this more fully than anyone else. Surrounded by men who assume Odysseus is dead, she refuses to surrender to the pressures placed upon her. Her famous weaving of the burial shroud is far more than a clever deception. Every night she quietly undoes the work she completed during the day, extending the fragile possibility that her husband may yet return. Her actions reveal a remarkable patience. Rather than confronting her circumstances through force, she resists them through endurance, preserving the future one day at a time. Telemachus demonstrates a different form of hope. His journey is less about crossing seas than about overcoming uncertainty. Raised in the shadow of an absent father, he could easily have accepted the belief that Odysseus belonged only to the past. Instead, he chooses to search. His voyage to Pylos and Sparta is motivated by little more than the possibility that answers may still exist. That willingness to act before certainty arrives becomes the first step in his own transformation from an uncertain youth into a worthy heir to his father's household. Odysseus himself offers the most demanding example. Years pass in captivity on Calypso's island. His own crew repeatedly undermines his efforts to return home, first by opening the bag of winds entrusted to him by Aeolus, and later by slaughtering the sacred cattle of Helios despite his warnings. Each act of disobedience erases months of progress and forces him to confront setbacks that would have broken many men. Yet Homer never allows him to abandon his purpose. Hope survives even when success appears increasingly remote. One episode captures this theme with particular elegance. After surviving the destruction of his raft, Odysseus finds himself suspended above the whirlpool of Charybdis, clinging to the branches of a solitary fig tree. Beneath him waits certain death. Around him there is nothing he can conquer through strength or outwit through cunning. His only choice is to hold on and wait. The image is striking because it strips the hero of every quality that usually defines him. Odysseus waits until the sea releases his raft, then lowers himself onto it and resumes his journey. The moment lasts only a short time within the narrative, yet it reveals something profound about Homer's understanding of perseverance. There are moments in life when progress depends less upon action than upon the refusal to let go. Seen in this light, hope becomes more than an emotion. It becomes an act of discipline. Penelope continues weaving. Telemachus continues searching. Odysseus continues rowing. None of them possesses certainty, yet each behaves as though the future is still worth striving toward. Perhaps this is why the gods so often intervene on their behalf. Divine assistance in the Odyssey rarely replaces human effort. Athena does not rescue those who have surrendered. She strengthens those who continue to move forward despite every reason to believe that their efforts may be in vain. Hope in Homer's world does not guarantee deliverance. It makes one ready to receive it when it finally arrives. The Odyssey also departs from the heroic tradition in the kind of excellence it chooses to celebrate. Physical courage remains essential, and Odysseus is every bit the warrior his reputation suggests. Yet Homer repeatedly demonstrates that strength alone is rarely enough to overcome the challenges that stand before him. More often than not, survival belongs to the man who understands when to fight, when to wait, when to deceive, and when to remain silent. This marks another quiet departure from the world of the Iliad. On the plains of Troy, conflicts are frequently resolved through direct confrontation. Great warriors seek one another on the battlefield, and their reputations rise or fall according to their prowess in combat. The Odyssey unfolds in a very different landscape. Odysseus wanders through unfamiliar lands where brute force often proves ineffective or even disastrous. Victory depends upon judgment rather than aggression. The encounter with the Cyclops illustrates this perfectly. Once trapped inside the cave, there is no military solution to the problem. Odysseus cannot overpower the giant, nor can he escape by force. His survival depends entirely upon his ability to observe, improvise, and anticipate his enemy's behavior. The famous deception of calling himself nobody has endured for centuries because it reveals a different kind of heroism, one rooted in intelligence rather than physical dominance. This pattern repeats itself throughout the poem. Odysseus survives Circe through careful preparation and divine counsel. He passes the sirens by acknowledging his own weakness instead of trusting his willpower alone. He navigates the dangers of Scylla and Charybdis by accepting that some losses cannot be avoided. Even upon reaching Ithaca, he does not immediately reclaim his throne. He disguises himself as a beggar, patiently observes the situation within his own household, identifies those who have remained loyal, and strikes only when success is assured. Patience may be the most underrated virtue in the entire Odyssey. In many stories, hesitation is portrayed as weakness. Homer presents the opposite view. Again and again, Odysseus restrains himself when immediate action would satisfy his emotions but jeopardize his purpose. He endures insults from the suitors while concealing his identity. He watches servants reveal their loyalties before deciding whom he can trust. He suppresses his pride because he understands that a single impulsive act could destroy everything he has spent 20 years trying to recover. This discipline stands in sharp contrast to the flaws that repeatedly prolong his journey. When Odysseus escapes from Polyphemus, he cannot resist revealing his true name to the defeated Cyclops. The impulse is understandable. After such a remarkable escape, he wishes to receive the recognition his ingenuity deserves. Yet that single moment of pride allows Polyphemus to call upon Poseidon, setting in motion years of additional hardship. Homer seems to suggest that intelligence alone is insufficient unless it is accompanied by mastery over one's own impulses. Wisdom requires not only knowing what to do, but also knowing when silence is the wiser course. Perhaps this is why Athena becomes Odysseus's constant divine companion. She is not merely the goddess of war, but of wisdom, prudence, and sound judgment. Her protection reflects the qualities Homer wishes to elevate. The Odyssey does not dismiss courage, but it repeatedly places wisdom above force and self-control above impulse. The greatest victories in the poem belong to the man who governs himself before attempting to govern the world around him. As the journey draws to its conclusion, it becomes increasingly clear that Homer is describing a different kind of greatness. The ideal hero is no longer defined solely by the enemies he defeats. He is defined by the judgment he acquires through suffering, the patience he develops through adversity, and the wisdom that finally allows him to return home not merely as a celebrated warrior, but as a better man. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Odyssey is that its true conflict does not end when Odysseus leaves Troy. In many heroic epics, the fall of the enemy city would have marked the natural conclusion of the story. The hero has triumphed, his name has been secured, and history remembers him among the great warriors of his age. Homer begins his story there. The Trojan War is already over before the Odyssey begins. The greatest military campaign of the Greek world belongs to the past, and with it, much of the glory that had defined an entire generation of heroes. What remains is a far more difficult question. How does a man return to ordinary life after spending years shaped by extraordinary violence? This is a question that echoes throughout the poem. Odysseus is no longer trying to win a kingdom. He already has one. He is trying to recover it from disorder. His challenge is no longer to overthrow a foreign enemy, but to restore justice within his own household. The suitors represent precisely the kind of decay that flourishes in the absence of rightful authority. They have not invaded Ithaca with an army, nor have they conquered it through force of arms. Their corruption is quieter. They consume another man's wealth, exploit the customs of hospitality for personal gain, intimidate Penelope, and slowly erode the moral order that once governed the household. Homer presents them less as warriors than as parasites living upon a kingdom whose foundations have weakened. The final confrontation therefore carries a significance that extends far beyond personal revenge. Odysseus is not simply reclaiming his home. He is restoring order to a world that has gradually descended into chaos during his absence. His victory reestablishes justice, authority, and legitimate kingship. The violence at the end of the poem is severe, yet Homer frames it as the difficult work of repairing a broken society rather than the pursuit of further conquest. Even this restoration, however, does not conclude the story. After the suitors have fallen, another cycle of bloodshed threatens to begin. Their families naturally seek vengeance, and Ithaca stands on the brink of civil conflict. Homer could easily have allowed the poem to end with another battle, yet he deliberately refuses this path. Athena intervenes, supported by the will of Zeus, and commands both sides to abandon their feud. Peace is restored before another generation can inherit the violence of the previous one. This ending reveals something profound about the Odyssey's understanding of civilization. A society cannot survive if every act of justice becomes the beginning of another act of revenge. The endless cycle of retaliation must eventually give way to reconciliation, or no victory can ever be final. Homer recognizes that preserving peace often demands greater wisdom than winning wars. Seen from this perspective, the Odyssey becomes a story about reconstruction. Nearly every important relationship within the poem has been fractured by time and conflict. Husband and wife must rediscover one another. Father and son must become strangers no longer. A king must regain the trust of his people. Even an aging father, Laertes, must be reunited with the son he believed he had lost forever. The poem steadily gathers these broken pieces until the household, and with it the kingdom, can once again become whole. Perhaps this is the deepest way in which the Odyssey differs from the heroic tradition that surrounds it. Homer understands that destroying is often easier than rebuilding. Cities can fall in a matter of days. Families require decades to restore. Armies can win wars through strength, but only wisdom, patience, forgiveness, and enduring loyalty can create a lasting peace. By the time the poem reaches its conclusion, Odysseus has accomplished something greater than the conquest of Troy. He has recovered the life that made every hardship worth enduring. There is a reason the Odyssey has never faded into obscurity. Its monsters have become legends. Its adventures have inspired countless stories, and its hero remains one of the most recognizable figures in literature. Yet these are not the reasons the poem continues to speak to readers after nearly 3 millennia. Its lasting power lies in the questions it asks about the purpose of human life. The Odyssey begins where most epics would end. The Great War has already been fought. The victories have already been won. The songs of glory have already been sung. Homer is less interested in asking how a man achieves greatness than in asking what that greatness is ultimately for. Throughout the poem, the answer gradually emerges. Heroic deeds matter because they protect something beyond themselves. Courage matters because there are people worth returning to. Intelligence matters because it preserves rather than merely destroys. Endurance matters because hope allows us to continue walking toward a future we cannot yet see. This explains why the poem never loses sight of Ithaca. Every storm, every monster, every temptation, and every setback ultimately derives its meaning from the destination. Had Odysseus sought adventure for its own sake, the story would have become little more than a sequence of remarkable episodes. Instead, Homer binds them together with a single human desire that remains as familiar today as it was in the 8th century before Christ, the longing to return home. This also explains the conversation between Odysseus and Achilles in the underworld. Achilles had obtained everything the heroic tradition promised. His name became immortal, his victories unforgettable, and his glory eternal. Yet from beyond the grave he speaks with the voice of regret. Odysseus, by contrast, spends the entire poem pursuing something far less celebrated, yet ultimately far more satisfying. He seeks a meal at his own table, the embrace of his wife, the companionship of his son, and the quiet dignity of a life restored. In doing so, Homer quietly reorders the values of the heroic world. Glory remains admirable, but it no longer occupies the highest place. The Odyssey proposes that the measure of a life cannot be found solely in the battles one wins or the reputation one leaves behind. It is equally found in the relationships one preserves, the responsibilities one fulfills, and the home one is willing to cross the world to reclaim. Perhaps this is why the Odyssey feels unexpectedly modern. Most of us will never stand before the walls of Troy, sail past the sirens, or outwit a cyclops. Yet nearly all of us understand what it means to long for home, to persevere through uncertainty, to endure disappointment without abandoning hope, and to discover that the things worth protecting are often the quietest ones. For that reason, the Odyssey is far more than an adventure. It is Homer's meditation on maturity itself. The young warrior dreams of earning a name that the world will remember. The older man begins to understand that history may remember his victories, but those who love him remember his presence. And that is Homer's final lesson. The greatest journey is never measured by the number of lands we conquer. It is measured by whether, after everything we have endured, we are still able to find our way home.